meeting today with Cottie Petrie-Norris, who is the current Assemblywoman of District 74. Thanks for meeting with us.
Brandis, hi. Thank you so much for having me. Really look forward to talking to you today.
First thing we want to get into is, can you please explain for our viewers what Assembly does?
So I'm so glad you started with that. When I first decided to run for the Assembly, which was about 2 years ago, I would tell people I was running for Assembly, and the first thing they would say to me is, "That's amazing, I'm so excited." And then the second thing they'd say is, "Wait, what is the California State Assembly?" So it's always a good place to start. The Assembly is essentially California's Congress. So working with our state senators and with the governor, we set policy for the state of California, we pass laws for the state of California, and we set the budget for the state of California, which is really a statement of our priorities. And California, as you know, isn't just the largest economy in the country. California is the fifth largest economy in the world. So we are making such important and critical decisions here each and every day.
How did your first year go?
It's been an incredible year. When I reflect back, I guess there's two things that come to mind. First is that this really is an extraordinary job, and it's been an honor and a privilege for me to be in a position to serve the state of California and the residents of the 74th Assembly District, and to be working on policy that's touching 40 million lives and helping to shape the future of the world's fifth largest economy. In the Assembly, I am working to protect our coastlines, to fully fund our public schools, to create good jobs, safe communities, and build a California economy where we can all succeed. In my first year, I had 11 bills that were signed into law and was able to bring millions of dollars in funding back to our district.
So we'll touch on that funding in our district
Okay,
in a bit. First, we asked all of our viewers what they want addressed in these interviews, what matters most to them. Mm-hmm. But first I wanted to see, before we get into their questions, what do you think are the biggest issues for District 74?
So at the top of the list for our district and for the state as a whole is combating homelessness. And that is a challenge that I am working on with urgency, along with our partners in city government and our partners in the county government, to ensure that we are addressing the homelessness crisis here in the 74th Assembly District. The other priorities that the constituents talk to me about are the climate crisis and ensuring that we are taking steps to protect our coastline and to safeguard California. And a third priority for me and for this district is education and workforce development, and ensuring that we are creating good jobs for our community and continuing to grow the California economy.
You touched on several of the issues, so we'll go over them as we go through the interview.
Great.
So let's start with, you said education. So what is your stance on charter schools?
So I believe that we always need to start from a perspective of what is good for our children. And I think sometimes in the fight between charter school advocates and traditional public school advocates, we lose sight of the fact that what matters most is what's best for our kids. And so I believe that there is a place in the education public school ecosystem for charter schools. There are so many incredible success stories where charters have been able to transform children's lives and transform communities. Unfortunately, as with any sphere, you have a handful of bad actors who have exploited certain loopholes and exploited our communities and exploited our children. So I think what we need to find is a balance that lets good charter schools flourish and that cracks down on bad operators. And I think that that's a balance we need to find, whether we're talking about education or almost any other sector.
So do you have any plans on any bills in the future to prevent these bad actors, since the Newport Mesa Unified School District has already had a charter school move in?
So this past legislative session, we passed 2 pieces of legislation to try to address that very issue. The first is a step to ensure more local control over charter approvals, and the second ensures that that charter appeals are not are not being reviewed at the state level. So I think we've made some really good progress, and I think we're going to see the impact of those changes on the ground in the coming year.
You had mentioned climate change, and that is one of the probably the most asked question from our viewers when I asked them for what they wanted us to address with you. So what are you doing for climate change?
So I think I believe that the climate crisis is the fundamental challenge that is confronting our generation. And California has really been a leader on addressing the climate crisis. We've got some of the most ambitious climate goals in the entire world. I think alongside the work that we need to do to achieve those goals, we need to do more to ensure that we are safeguarding California, that we are taking steps to mitigate the inevitable impacts of climate change, and that we're taking steps to address the changes that we're already seeing. So I'm focused on a couple of areas. I'm very focused on the threat of sea level rise, and that is a very real challenge here in our community and in coastal communities all across the state. When you look at California, when you look at the projections for sea level rise in coming years, in coming decades, there are millions of dollars, millions of people and billions of dollars that are at risk. So I authored a piece of legislation this year to invest in natural infrastructure solutions to address the threat of sea level rise. Alongside that work, I've been very focused on investments in innovative technologies to improve our abilities to fight wildfires here in our district and all across the state.
Another big issue from our viewers is health care. Do you support or oppose universal health care for the state of California?
So the United States is we are the only industrialized nation in the entire world that doesn't have some kind of a universal health care for their citizens. And I think when you think about the fact that we are the most powerful nation the world's ever seen, we are the most successful economy, the fact that we're the only industrialized nation out of 40 that doesn't offer that for our citizens, I think it's really shameful. And it's not just, I think, a moral issue, it's also an economic issue, because when you compare the cost of healthcare in America with the countries that do have universal care, our costs are actually something like 2x what the countries that do have universal care have. So I think that we know that our current system isn't working and we need to do more. So I absolutely support universal health care as a concept. What I don't support is the elimination of private insurance or the mandating of a single payer system, because I just don't think that that's the most effective or the most cost-effective way for us to get there. So I think in California, what we're doing is taking some incremental steps to get to universal care, and that's the model that I support.
So you mentioned the state is taking some steps. One of those steps is offering coverage for young people, whether they're undocumented or born here. Do you support our tax dollars going to that?
I did not support that part of the budget. I disagree with that as a policy priority. I am much more supportive and much more focused on the work that the administration is doing to lower healthcare costs. One example, in the budget proposal that the governor just announced yesterday, he announced a really innovative and groundbreaking approach to lower the cost of pharmaceutical drugs here in California. And what he's proposing is that the state create our own generic label for pharmaceutical drugs, which will enable us to harness the purchasing power of the state of California and offer lower priced prescriptions and lower priced pharmaceuticals for the citizens of California. So I'm excited about that. I don't always see eye to eye with every part of the administration, and I think that's okay. I think that we can have policy disagreements and still ensure that we're moving the ball forward.
There's been a lot of talk lately on taxes in California. We have Prop 13 and the gas tax. Did you vote on any bills that raised our taxes?
So I'm actually proud to say that I was one of only 15 members of the California legislature to receive 100% rating from the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. And I'm actually the first Democrat, not just this year, but I'm the first Democrat in history to receive 100% rating from the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. I also received an award from the Orange County Taxpayers Association for my work this year to protect Prop 13. So I absolutely consider myself a taxpayer advocate and will continue to fight to ensure that we don't increase the tax burden on the people I represent.
That brings us to a little sound clip we have. We interviewed Diane Dixon last week, and we asked her why she was running when you're polling so well. So here's what she had to say.
Okay.
The incumbent, Cottie Petrie-Norris, has been polling very high. She's getting along well with her fellow assembly members. What are your complaints against her that's fueling your run?
Well, let me just comment on her fellow assembly members. They're all her Democrats. Of course, they're all happy up there because they're one party, a supermajority in control, and have a super highway of new laws coming out in this last legislative session that are, in my opinion, destroying and transforming California. So she is part of that. The Newsom, I say she has Newsom branded on her forehead. Because there are so many Democrats, the supermajority that I've talked about, they don't need all the Democrats to vote for everything. They can let a few off and let them vote in a different way so they can create a better voting record in a more conservative district like Assembly District 74 is. And so there have been some pieces of legislation, just a small number, that she has voted for to be looked upon more favorably in Assembly District 74. They've got one party. One party is in control, and it's getting worse. Education is ranked 37. We've spent billions of dollars in California on education, and it's ranked 37 in the country. The state budget went from $9 billion to $109 billion in 10 years. Where's all this money going? It's not fixing roads and highways. We pay more gas taxes, and it's not fixing roads and highways. We have significant structural and financial issues in California, and the one-party state is not solving these problems. And the incumbent belongs to the one party, and she's not solving these problems. She does not represent the people of Assembly District 74 who want local control, who want safe cities, who want good education for their families, who want to solve the homeless crisis in our cities. It's not happening with this legislature.
So basically, she is saying you don't really represent the people of District 74, saying they have more Republicans than Democrats, and that you only vote certain ways to appease the conservative voters and appear balanced against the supermajority. So do you want to address that?
Sure. I think what I would say is two things. I ran for this seat because I felt like after decades of Republican representation, our district was getting shortchanged by Sacramento, and I was determined to address that, and I believe that I have, and I believe that I'm in a position to continue to do that. And I guess that the idea that I'm kind of pretending to be like the people I represent seems sort of strange to me. I think that the reason I was elected, and the reason I think I'll continue to be elected, is that I align really well with the people that I represent, and I feel like I authentically share many of their values and many of their priorities, which is not to say that we're all going to always agree on everything. And I think that we can have substantive conversations about our policy differences without kind of devolving into our corners and kind of being you're all on the red team or you're all on the blue team. I don't think that's productive, and I didn't come to this job as a political insider. As you may know, this is the first time I had ever run for office or been elected to office. And when I approach my job, I approach it as a mom, as a businesswoman, and as a member of this amazing community. And I think that's a perspective that has served me well, and a perspective that's allowed me to serve my constituents well.
We have another clip from her.
She's a nice person, but that doesn't mean she's voting for laws that will help our community. It's kind of bait and switch because she could be nice, but she's voting for laws that harm our communities. Now, there have been, as I mentioned, a few bills that she has supported that look good to this coastal community of Huntington Beach, Costa Mesa, Newport Beach, and Irvine. But when you really drill down to the long-term effects of some of this tremendous taking away of local control and imposing state mandates is not good for our communities.
So she said that you have taken control away from our local communities. Do you feel that you have done that?
I don't feel like I've done that, no.
Is there anything else she said you want to address before we move on?
No, I don't think so. I wasn't completely clear kind of what point she was making with those comments. And honestly, I think for me, in my view, the work I need to do right now is really focus on doing this job. And we are sitting here, it's January of 2020. We have a really busy agenda in front of us. And I think California and this district, we are facing some very real challenges. We're also facing some really exciting opportunities. And so I'm really looking forward to a busy and productive year serving the folks that I represent and getting things done for this community.
So California has recently passed some laws forcing cities to change their housing, whether it's changing zoning or the amount of units they have to have. Did you support these changes?
So as you know, we are facing a housing and homelessness crisis all across the state of California. And people at every level of government, whether it's our local city elected officials, the county supervisors, our state representatives, our federal representatives, we're working really hard to figure out what can we do to address this. I think that there's a lot of ideas that people come to the table with, and some of them are good, some of them are bad. I don't always agree with some of the proposals from my colleagues, and I work really hard to ensure that when I'm voting on proposals to address our housing and homelessness crisis, I'm doing that with the will of the people I represent in mind.
Taking the control away from the local communities, a lot of what that is the state of California changed some laws saying that cities had to either change their zoning or add units. I know Costa Mesa alone was just told they have to add almost 12,000 new units.
So I'm glad you asked this question because I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding out there, and it sounds like maybe some of that misunderstanding is being purposefully cultivated. So every 10 years, the state of California goes through a housing planning process. And what happens is that the state government assigns targets for regional councils of government. And the Orange County is part of something called SCAG, which is the Southern California Association of Governments. SCAG is unique in terms of as a planning entity because SCAG includes 115 cities and covers 22 million people across the state of California. So it's a giant entity for this kind of planning. But what happens is the state gives a certain target number to SCAG, which is supposed to act as the regional planning body. And it's really at that level where our county officials and our city officials are supposed to be doing their jobs to advocate for their communities. And what happened as a part of this latest planning cycle was that these regional planning entities, there was a certain proposal that was put forth by staff that was acceptable for many of our Orange County representatives. At the very last minute, there was a substitute proposal that was put forth by some of the representatives from Riverside, from Imperial, from LA County. And those are the new numbers that people are debating. And I would say a couple things. So number one, what's really unfortunate is that Orange County actually had an opportunity to have our housing numbers decided not by SCAG, but divvied up by Orange County itself. So we could have said to the state, I would like to be treated as our own council of government for purposes of determining what these housing targets need to be. We could have done that, and our local leaders failed to do that. We also could have done a better job of advocating within SCAG for what a preferred methodology could have been. And unfortunately, our local leaders failed to do that. And so I think some of our local leaders are now saying, "Oh, it's the state is doing this to us." This is a process that happens every 10 years, and this is actually a process that's supposed to be a local and regional planning exercise. So there was a couple of missed opportunities, which is unfortunate. Now, at this point where we are, I am working really closely with our city officials to appeal this new methodology and to push for what I view would be some more reasonable housing targets. And so we are deep in those conversations right now. And I'll continue to serve as an advocate for the cities that I represent and continue to work alongside them to hopefully develop some more reasonable targets for our 10-year planning process.
While we're on the subject of housing, homelessness is a huge issue in California. This is even on national news. It's gotten so bad. I know you've done some work on that. So what have you done and what do you plan to do further?
So as we said at the very beginning of our conversation, homelessness right now is the number one issue for voters here in this district and voters all across the state. And along with many of my constituents, it's one of my top priorities. This past year, the state government allocated $650 million in emergency funding to our city governments and our county governments to help them address this crisis on the ground. And I have specifically been really focused on the issue of veteran homelessness. Right now, there are over 300 homeless veterans here in Orange County. And I think we can all agree that no one who has sacrificed so much for so many of us, no one who has served our country, should find themselves without a roof over their heads. So this past year, I secured $2.9 million in funding for a program with the Orange County United Way called Welcome Home OC. And this program is going to enable us to be on track to end veteran homelessness here in Orange County.
A lot of people recently are really upset over the potential recall of Prop 13. It's going to raise taxes for a lot of homeowners and businesses, really affecting small businesses. What is your take on this?
So there are a couple of groups that are pushing a ballot initiative, which, as you said, would change Prop 13. It's sometimes called the split roll approach. I do not support that. I do not support any changes to Prop 13. I am working hard to ensure that we protect Prop 13.
So it's been estimated back in 2016 that 1,800 businesses are leaving California a year. Why do you think that is?
I think that we need to do a better job for our small business owners. Small business owners and small businesses are the backbone of this economy, and 95% of businesses in California are actually small businesses. And I've got a small business advisory council that I established in my first term, and I'll continue to work with that group to identify practical solutions so we can keep Orange County businesses open, that we can continue to create good jobs, and we can continue to build a strong and thriving economy.
Now, 2 years ago, the state declared itself a sanctuary state. Huntington Beach and Newport Beach opposed this. Do you back Newport and Huntington Beach, or do you back the state?
So interesting timing for this question, because this issue has been litigated in court by Huntington Beach. There was an initial ruling, I believe, that found in favor of the state. Then on initial appeal, the appeal found in favor of Huntington Beach. Just yesterday, the sort of next level of appeals court ruled against the lawsuit by Huntington Beach. So for now, this is kind of a settled issue.
Well, that doesn't answer if you're for or against it.
So when the subject of SB 54 was being debated before the state, though I wasn't in the legislature, I certainly followed that issue really closely. And I think what I was struck by is that so many of our local law enforcement officers actually do support SB 54 because we know that our communities are most safe when all community members feel safe dealing with local law enforcement. So to me, the real issue with SB 54 was ensuring that we keep our communities as safe as possible. And so for that reason, I am supportive.
Since Prop 47 and AB 109, there's been a huge increase in both crime and drug abuse, especially in District 74. Do you have any plans to help reduce the crime or drug abuse in our district?
So violent crimes are actually falling locally and all across the state, which is good news. I've got a really good working relationship with our local law enforcement organizations and with the sheriff. And there's a couple of things that we're working on together. I'm working on a piece of legislation with our sheriff, Don Barnes, that would increase the penalties for fentanyl, for fentanyl sales. So right now, fentanyl is one of the most deadly and dangerous drugs in the world. And fentanyl deaths have been on the rise over the last several years. It's still classified as something that's not as serious as drugs like cocaine. And that's actually increasing the production and increasing the prevalence of this super dangerous drug. So we're working on a bill together that would actually treat fentanyl as the dangerous substance that it really is.
You said violent crime is going down, but it's more the property crime that is rising, and that's where a lot of the residents of District 74 are getting frustrated. Car break-ins constantly. My car was broken into and they only stole my mints, but I still had to clean up the huge mess.
Right.
So there's just a lot more of that going on. How can we fight that so we could feel safe just going out to our cars at night?
And safe neighborhoods are ultimately at the top of everyone's list. When we think about quality of life, we all want to make sure that our neighborhoods are safe. And I think a really big issue that we have seen in the 74th Assembly District has been related to the issue of substance abuse. And the just, I think, frank reality is that our system of care and our system of regulation for substance abuse treatment is fundamentally broken all across the state. So in a state where there's so much that is hyper-regulated, the substance abuse treatment industry is this kind of Wild West, do whatever you want, like free for all. And we have seen the manifestations of that in our own communities with the proliferation of sober living homes that are run by really unscrupulous operators who are frankly exploiting people for profits and not actually helping people get their lives back on track. So that's an issue that has been at the top of my priority list since I ran for office. And this past year, I established and have been leading a bipartisan working group on substance abuse treatment. And our goals for this group this year are to establish licensing requirements for outpatient and inpatient drug treatment programs, and to crack down on bad actors, to ensure that we're taking steps both to protect patients and to protect our communities. And I'm really optimistic. We're working closely with the administration. I'm really optimistic that we're going to be able to make some good progress and get some very important things done on that this year.
Matt Harper received more votes than you in the primaries, but you beat him in the general election. Why do you think that is?
So in the 2018 election, in the primary, there was a couple of other Democrats running. So there was we split a bit of the vote. And in the general election, we were able to consolidate all of that Democratic support. And I think I was also able to reach out to a broad base of both no party preference voters and also some Republican voters and share our message and share our priorities. And I think that's why we were able to ultimately prevail in the general election. As you may know, we ended up winning by 5 percentage points and 10,000 votes.
What do you think about the recall efforts of Gavin Newsom?
I don't think they're going to get traction. And I think, frankly, whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, I think there are so many important, real challenges that we need people on deck to solve and on deck to address. So it seems kind of pointless to me.
One final question. Why should the people of District 74 vote for you?
I am so honored and so privileged to do this job and to serve the districts of the residents of the 74th Assembly District. In my first year in office, I was able to enact 11 pieces of legislation. I was able to bring millions of dollars back to this district for critical initiatives to improve the quality of life for the district residents. And when I look ahead to 2020, I am really excited about everything that we are going to achieve and everything that we're going to be able to accomplish for the 74th Assembly District. So I look forward to continuing to serve you and to serve the 74th District for many years to come.